Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trade and Perspectives. As always, we have our good friends, Sam Clement and Courtney Trush. I'll say hello.
How's it going?
Hey, John.
Hey, guys. Really the big headline over the last couple of weeks, after we got the CPI out of the way, after we got the Fed meeting out of the way, last week, weirdly enough, we were talking about submarines.
Yep.
More importantly, we were talking about missing submarines and what happened to the fate of the people in the submersible. I guess it's a better way of putting it. And all of that stuff, and it really captured the world's attention. You could go not just to U.S. websites, but you could go to Canadian, British, even Chinese websites were discussing the fate of the people in the OceanGate Titan as they went, 12,500 feet below the ocean surface in order to view the remains or the debris field of the Titanic. And so, obviously, we all know what happened next. It just begs the question, why?
Well, I think first off, there's something at least somewhat noble about using your money to explore things, and I think is like a part that we've talked about. Part of the human condition is to learn more, to explore things. I think it's we've talked before about how much people blow their money on just stupid, awful things. I think spending $250,000 to maybe go explore something that less people have been to than have been in space is something that to me is kind of cool, at least from the...
I mean, speaking of blowing money, truly, Courtney, as we all well know, this is $250,000 in order to get into essentially a large sausage can and
Right.
and be crushed by 6,000 pounds per square inch, if you catch my drift. Understanding that you have spent upwards of $75 on a teacup and also spent an enormous amount of money on these pastel drinking cups that you have, which could be viewed as perhaps frivolous expenditures. What do you think about the amount of money that these people spent to go into the submersible, and then where does the money go now that these people have perished? And who pays for all the people? Who pays for all the man hours of the Coast Guard and all that stuff? Who pays for all this?
Well, we do. And I think that that's what's hard for me. I mean, I think it's fine that someone chooses, to Sam's point, like, yes, I would much rather use my money for travel than material things. I don't think everyone feels that way. But I think, yes, well, it's $45. That's totally different than $250,000. He's looking at my Stanley Cup.
It's all right.
Yeah, well.
$45 to you is about the same as $250,000 to Jeff Bezos. So just what I'm saying.
Okay, well, that says a lot right there. But to that point, there are people who are adventurers, and you wonder, while they had to sign away their life, so there's no, I guess, from my understanding, there isn't going to be a lawsuit for their deaths because they signed away all of that before they got in the Titan.
Assumption of the risk, I think is what maybe a legal term for it.
As long as it was a fair assumption of risk.
And you look at, well, I'm sure somebody could argue it, but you look at, okay, so $1 million. There were 4 people paying $250,000 each. So that's $1 million. Yeah,
that's $1
y'all
million.
Catch up with me.
Yeah.
I know, I'm a numbers person now.
Yeah, we have the numbers in the head according to Courtney.
Right,
yeah.
right, and the estimated. So I didn't realize this, but legally, any type of like rescue agency for the government cannot ask for money in return for rescue efforts, nor do they release how much it actually costs for them. But
that's a crazy rule.
It is, but according to a New York Times article, they estimated the response of the rescue costing potentially $100 million. $100 million to try to find them, and ultimately, discovering that they had...
About 1/63 of the latest Ukraine package or tax error.
Well, there you go. So that's Courtney. Sam and our numbers people, we have them in the head and all that. As you
so annoying.
As you have established, but doing a little math, 250,000 times 4, that's $1 million as we've established.
Yes.
And then $100 million to find them dead. I mean, that's for every $1 they spent to go to their deaths down at the bottom of the ocean. We spent $100 to find out that they spent $1 million to go to their deaths in the bottom of the ocean. Courtney, that doesn't seem like necessarily a great expenditure of the Coast Guard's money. How do you feel about that?
You're saying it doesn't seem like
It doesn't necessarily seem like a great expenditure of the Coast Guard's money, particularly when, I don't care if it's assumption of the risk. Why should you, Courtney, 4 kids at the house, you got all these people to feed, let alone go to college?
Yeah.
So, do you think truly, in all seriousness, it is fair to ask people to do these extreme sorts of activities when they get lost, as Steve Fawcett or something like that,
Right.
when they get lost or they get hurt, they get trapped down in the Grand Canyon because they went hiking without any water, or that type of stuff, that the public fits the bill for their rescue when they have assumed an enormous amount of risk on their own.
So I don't necessarily think like hiking and getting lost or something like that is much like lower cost, because you're looking at a lot more people, right, in that scenario. But I think these extreme, like if you're going to outer space, or you're going and you're paying $250,000 to do this submersion, in which it isn't necessarily extremely safe, that there aren't as many safety measures, and that you're taking on that risk, there should be some type of required insurance or something like that would cover like at least partial of the rescue mission. So I saw in additional research that if you plan to hike Mount Everest, that you're required to have insurance for if you get lost, and sometimes it covers the cost of finding someone.
Who's
in
requiring that?
I believe it's Nepal, yeah. And then there's also, you have to pay like a permitting and all of this additional cost to hike it. So I just wonder if you are doing the more extreme and it is limited to the ridiculously wealthy individual, then you have the means, and it really shouldn't be that much of an imposition to them to pay the additional whatever, 100,000, 200,000 that would go towards any type of rescue. It would be insurance for that.
What about the people who are getting lost in the Grand Canyon? Should they?
No,
have
that's what I
insurance
just
as well?
said.
So
I don't.
The rich ones.
I think that if it is the extreme, obviously this costs more money to find them $100 million to go 4 miles or whatever it is in the deep into the ocean. That's just going to have more cost than it would if you were, lost in the Grand Canyon. That's just not going to be as expensive. And I haven't run the numbers on that, so you look like you might know it, but I don't know the numbers on that, so that's my assumption. I do think also repeat offenders should, there's something more in depth. So John, you mentioned Steve Fawcett. He was rescued at least 3 times before his death, each time costing hundreds of thousands of dollars for Australians and people around the world to rescue him because of these adventures of him seeking out this notoriety of these prestigious, records. Yet he didn't foot the bill until his death, in which, I guess someone had donated $200,000 to his search, to cover the cost, and then they tried to go to his estate to pay the additional $500,000, and they were denied.
Keep going, you're on a roll.
Well, that's it. I'm just saying that I think that there should be some requirement, as these, kind of to your point, people are becoming more and more thrill seekers, and I think there should be at some limit. If I'm going to space and it's Jeff Bezos or whoever wants to go to space, he should be able to pay for someone that has to go find him in Mars if he gets stuck there. I'm not paying for that.
Yes, you are.
I don't want to pay for it.
Sam, Courtney has really kind of vented her spleen a little bit about how she feels about, I ain't going to pay for that, all that stuff. Let's take it down a notch or shift it aside a little bit and talk about not just paying it, because it is an expensive endeavor for the Coast Guard to go do that. And we could probably debate, and people would take both sides of it and what have you. I think really a lot of people would say they were foolish to go down there. And they didn't really appreciate the risk and what have you. But you made a pretty valid point. Without people, I'm talking about Sam now, Courtney. Without people willing to take some risk, nothing ever gets done.
No.
And without people willing to sit on top of a Gemini rocket, sit on top of an Apollo rocket, nothing gets done. And even for we take people like the Christopher Columbus and Magellan and some of these early European explorers, them going off across the Atlantic Ocean is almost the equivalent of flying into outer space today. And going to the bottom of the ocean, how's that really any different than people trying to do in a shackle tent or something like that? And so without people willing to do this, without willing to pay, maybe the exploration doesn't get done, and that's really a loss for mankind.
Yeah.
Are they
And I
being
think-
innovators though? I mean, they're going. We've already innovated. We've already found the Titanic. We can go down there and look at it in a safe way. This is commercializing it.
I'm cool with that.
I'm just saying it's
the
not the
problem
same.
I have with a lot of this, and talking not specifically about the submarine, is, if the government wants to require, first I think any, whether it's police services,
What?
fire departments, all that, those are the toughest things to privatize, and
You're right, they are.
And so, but talking about going up to space, if the government wants to, require Bezos or whoever to get insurance to go up there and do that, I'm not sure they should really be reaping any of the benefits that they get from going up there and exploring. That doesn't seem to be the case.
But are they going to explore and discover stuff, or are they already going like to the moon? We've already been there, done that.
Okay, Elon Musk
Have we?
has
Oh gosh, here we go.
SpaceX has created rockets that can land back on the landing platform. That is technology that is going to benefit everyone. It's going to benefit the
And
US
without
government.
without the desire to eventually turn a profit, SpaceX would not have done that.
Right.
Or NASA
Right,
would. NASA
there's-
would have done that if it were in charged with generating a profit. The desire to generate a profit creates all kinds of incentives.
Well, right, and I think that the thought that if they go and discover something from the private sector, they will reap the benefits of that discovery financially. It's not like they have to hand it over to the government for free.
That's not the way it works in every society.
Well, right, but we're talking about our society.
What do you think about that, Sam? Yep.
I don't know.
Well,
Like, I just think there's yes, 100 million is a lot, and I do think there should probably be some, but
What the thing is for me, it's listen. Those people probably, wealthy guys, all that stuff. Even if they couldn't afford, their estates couldn't afford to pay all of it, some sort of what's known as like a peppercorn in legalese, some sort of I'm paying back something. I think would be appropriate based on if it's $10,000 or something like that. I think it's just more symbolic than
But
anything else.
was there like some contractual agreement with the Coast Guard or whoever to come search and rescue for them?
not to my understanding.
I'm not sure about that at all.
So that seems like that's like the duty that we have placed on these organizations is that they go do that. They don't leave people behind.
Right, yep.
So why, if I'm not asking for it, that's something that you're talking about, the Nepalese Sherpas that have contracts, like, because they go up there, they have made that agreement with them. That's why they, I feel like, have that ability to say, we need to be paid for the possible risk that we're going to go out there and take.
That's a great point. These are people in that country. They're doing it, and Nepal has limited resources, using the money from the insurance policy to, essentially rescue people or find them. However, in our country, obviously much wealthier than Nepal. Even so, I was curious as to why is the Coast Guard out there? These are international waters.
Right, that's
that
what-
didn't
yeah.
happen, 10 miles or 20 miles or whatever it is off of the U.S. coast.
300 miles or so off Newfoundland?
Yeah, off of Newfoundland. It would have been Canadian territory waters, if anything,
Yeah.
maybe Greenland or something like that. How is it that the U.S. Coast Guard gets out there and does that? And that was a question mark for me. I didn't understand.
Well, I think, just like with any type of search and rescue, everyone wants to be helpful. You think about wildfires or something like that, and it's like, okay, well, we send people internationally or to other states to help in those efforts because everyone's like all hands on deck, right? Like to find someone and to hope. Especially since there was a timeline with this saying they only have 40 hours left of oxygen or whatever it was. And so I think people, that's just kind of what's ingrained in the Coast Guard or others is to, hey, we got to go out there and help. And I get that. And I also think that you've got to keep your interest aligned, which is why it's important that they're not looking at the money side of it. But at the same time, if you're going to have something this risky that would be that expensive for the search and rescue, And maybe it is. Maybe it's greater than, 500,000 or whatever, which I know you can't necessarily always estimate that cost, but to have some type of insurance to assist in, or maybe it's not even the consumer individually, but it's the entity itself that they have to have that, or maybe they have some understanding, like you're saying, with if they're in Canadian waters with that search and rescue, like, hey, notifying you that we're going down, and maybe they did. I just couldn't see it, or I didn't read it in any of the articles. But
I think part of it is that the
reasonable.
U.S. being the global superpower almost has their own self-expectation
right.
to go play part in this. The depths that they were
Morality.
at, there's single digits number of submersibles that can go to that depth.
That's right.
It's not like, the two Pakistanis on it. I'm sure Pakistan probably doesn't have one. Most countries don't, and I'm sure a lot of these are privatized on top of it. So there's already that expectation that the U.S. is going to go play part in it, and that's really almost part of what we have founded our country on, I would say.
Well, it brings up a good point, and I guess we need to start wrapping this one up a little bit. Do you think, moving forward, and I wrote about this in last week's Common Sense on June 23rd, if you want to go to our website, oakworth.com, take a look at it. I discussed this very issue. Do you think that because of this and because of the technology that's currently out there and willingness for people to spend vast amounts of money, do you think that although OceanGate had a failure in this case, this will engender more firms and more people to be more curious about the ocean and just maybe the world around them, and be willing to explore a little bit more, understanding that on this great blue marble on which we live, the ocean is really sort of the last frontier?
It is the last frontier, and I think probably so. I think with any event like this, maybe it changes the, I guess, checks and balances, you may call it, before doing something, that does have this risk. Once you hear about it, it kind of becomes front of the mind. And so I think people weight the risks maybe a little more heavily than even maybe they should, but nonetheless, I do think it creates a bigger focus. Same thing like the space exploration created a bigger focus on space.
Well,
I think we're still bearing fruit from that.
Yeah, and people don't even realize that it's out there. Like, I didn't know that you could pay to do that. I had no idea. Not that I have that kind of money to do it, but in the New York Times article, they said that about 1 million tourists a year embark on some sort of underwater sightseeing expedition, according to Triton Submarines. Well, it says that they offer super yacht submersibles, which the underwater vessels reportedly cost between $2.5 million and $40 million. One of the expeditions include a
Was it go down 500 feet or something?
No, I don't know, but they say that you can pay a certain amount to go to stay overnight at like a Hawaiian island of Maui. It's a submarine hotel equipped with a chef and a butler, and it takes you
Be pretty cramped.
Yeah, well, it's $300,000 a night.
You see, I wouldn't enjoy that type of stuff, which leads me to kind of closing this up. I'm going to ask you guys each a question. Courtney.
Yes.
If you knew with 100% certainty it was going to be safe, and you would go down and go back, would you ever, if you had the money, eventually pay $250,000 to go tour the remains of the Titanic, the debris field?
If it was a much larger, I don't think I would do it at all in the current confinement of how small that thing was.
But if it had one of those leather seats that you can recline and warm and all that
yes,
stuff.
it would be super cool to say that I had seen the Titanic in real life, and if you could promise me the safety and I just had money to blow. I mean, why wouldn't I want to do that?
Let's assume your current financial situation. What would be the maximum amount of money you would pay to do something like that?
Like $500.
How about you?
I'd pay more than that.
Yeah, I would too.
Absolutely.
My financial situation.
I think things like that are. But you talked about.
You just came back from London.
Wanting to spend money on vacations, and you could go see something that very few alive people have ever seen.
I am not interested in doing it right. Like, it would not be in my top 10.
I don't even think you would need to eliminate all the risk for me to be interested in doing
really?
that.
Mm-hmm.
I think doing something like that, like Everest, to me is something I doubt I'll ever get a chance to do, but I think would be so awesome to have the ability to do it well.
Getting back around to Nepal here at the end. I think I love it.
Wow.
I would love to do that. I'd love to, eventually, if space travel becomes more
nope, not interested in that at all.
Feasible.
Yeah.
for normal people, I think that's something, you know,
What about you, John?
it's risk taking and like exploring. I think is again going back to part of the human condition.
I mean, I would love to explore. At one point, I thought that it'd be really cool to go to base camp at Everest up in Nepal. Then I found out. Have you ever seen video of the plane that flies into that area?
Yeah.
That right there is
Short
risk enough.
laneway.
Yeah, it's a real short. That right there is problem enough. And then of course you also have base camp is still at like 17,000 feet or something
You
ridiculous.
have to hike to that?
Yeah, you have to hike to base camp. You know, I'm not in the shape to do any of it. So I took that off my bucket list. I guess if I had one thing that I would like to do is I could never get Beth to agree to this. Is to go to Japan and climb Mount Fuji
Yeah.
for for sunrise. And you can actually do that. They've got a bunch of switchbacks, and they've made it a whole thing. So that you would not
How
be
high is it?
10,000 feet. I mean, it's a goodly walk. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you'll get up there, but you're not going to need a ice pick or anything like that. They've made it where, you know, if you're in reasonably good shape, you can take care of them. So that'd be it from him.
You can do it.
Yeah, I have to climbing up the Lookout Mountain in Mentone is not quite the same as climbing up Mount Fuji. In any event, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you all. So if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in hearing more, reading more about what we have to say or what we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab, and find all kinds of exciting information, including links to previous podcasts, as well as links to our blog/newsletter, Common Sense. Y'all have anything else to say on this topic here today?
That's all I got.
That's it, John.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.